Well, here we are back again for another deep dive, and wow, this time it's a doozy.
Yeah, can't say it's been a quiet start to the year.
It's January 21st, 2025, so the day after President Trump's second inauguration.
Second term. Can you believe it?
And he is not wasting any time.
Not at all.
So yesterday was a flurry of executive orders and directives.
Like, more than we've ever seen before. It's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, it's unprecedented, and instead of trying to give like a broad overview of everything,
Right, because we could spend the whole episode on that and still not scratch the surface.
we're going to focus specifically on those executive orders and directives, what they say, what they're trying to do, what the potential ripple effects might be.
I think that's a good approach. Get into the nitty-gritty, you know?
Yeah, because I think what's really fascinating here is the sheer volume of these actions really sets the tone. It's a very assertive start to his term.
Absolutely. It's a statement, right? I'm back, and I'm here to do things my way.
Yeah, no kidding. And right off the bat, one thing that is incredibly clear is immigration is a major focus. Several directives targeting all different aspects of the immigration system.
A lot to unpack there.
It's interesting just how there are so many immigration-related actions. Was this something that you anticipated?
I mean, it was definitely a cornerstone of his previous term and his campaign, so the emphasis isn't surprising. But the sheer number and, like, the specific targets, that's noteworthy.
Yeah, it's very targeted. For example, he's declared a national emergency at the southern border.
Right out the gate.
Now, you remember him doing this during his first term. I mean, I certainly do.
Yeah, it's not a new tactic for him.
And it really raises the question of how this declaration might be used to justify actions that could face legal challenges or public opposition.
Well, that's always the question with these kinds of things, isn't it? How far can you push it?
Another key area he's targeting is asylum, specifically with the reinstatement of the Remain in Mexico policy,
Oh, yeah, that's back. Officially known as the Migrant Protection Protocols.
which requires asylum seekers arriving at the southern border to stay in Mexico while their cases are processed in U.S. courts.
It was highly controversial during his first term, and I'm sure its revival is going to generate just as much pushback.
Yeah, I mean, human rights groups are already mobilizing.
Absolutely.
He's also taking aim at birthright citizenship, so the principle that anyone born on U.S. soil is automatically a U.S. citizen.
Which is a pretty fundamental concept in our legal system.
He's directed the Attorney General to explore ways to limit this right, but it's almost certain to face legal challenges based on the 14th Amendment.
The 14th Amendment has long been interpreted as guaranteeing birthright citizenship, so any attempt to restrict it is going to be a major uphill battle.
Yeah, probably ends up in a Supreme Court battle.
Most likely.
So it's clear he's not shying away from these potential legal battles. But what about the practicalities of implementing some of these directives?
Yeah, like, can he actually do all this stuff?
Yeah, are they even feasible?
That's a crucial question, and one that experts are already raising. Some of these measures, especially the immigration ones, could be incredibly difficult to implement quickly or effectively.
Yeah, they can strain resources, lead to logistical challenges.
It's one thing to issue a directive, it's another thing to actually make it happen.
No, it's not just about immigration, right? He's issued directives across a whole range of areas, which I guess gives us a little glimpse into his broader priorities.
Yeah, we're seeing the bigger picture starting to emerge.
Absolutely. And one that I think is particularly interesting is the creation of a brand new cabinet-level department
A new one.
called the Department of Government Efficiency,
I guess that makes sense. Efficiency is always a good thing, right?
or DOGE, as it's already being called, with the somewhat unexpected appointment of Elon Musk as its potential head.
Elon Musk, huh? That's a curveball.
Yeah, so Elon Musk leading a government department, that's not something you see every day.
No, not exactly your typical bureaucrat.
What do you make of that choice? And, like, what's the thinking behind this whole new department in the first place?
Well, on the surface, it seems like a push for streamlining government operations, cutting costs. Those are things that both parties can usually get behind.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But Musk's, well, let's say, lack of experience in government.
Yeah, and his sometimes, shall we say, unconventional approach to leadership.
It's definitely going to raise some eyebrows. Whether he's actually the right person for this job, well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah, I think we'll have to wait and see on that one. There's also a directive on restoring freedom of speech and preventing government censorship.
Ah, yes, the free speech debate. Always a hot topic.
So this directs the Attorney General to investigate government agencies for potential censorship under the previous administration, which of course taps into this very complex and heated debate about the limits of free speech.
Especially online, where the lines get really blurry.
So how this plays out in practice, and like what exactly constitutes censorship in the eyes of this administration?
Yeah, who gets to decide what's censorship and what's not?
That's going to be interesting to watch. The potential for this order to be used in various ways, and possibly to target political opponents.
Well, that's certainly a concern, isn't it? It could be a slippery slope.
And then there's the decision to withdraw the U.S. from the World Health Organization again.
Oh, that's back on the table. We went through this during his first term, remember?
This was attempted during his first term, reversed by Biden, and now we're right back to square one.
Deja vu all over again.
Yeah, it seems like a recurring theme here. A lot of these directives seem to be pretty directly reversing policies put in place by the Biden administration. Is that a fair assessment?
I think that's a very fair assessment, and it really highlights just how stark the ideological differences are between Trump and Biden.
Yeah, night and day.
This approach of actively reversing the previous administration's agenda, it's a deliberate strategy, and it's likely to be a source of just constant conflict and debate throughout his entire term.
Yeah, it's setting the stage for a pretty contentious 4 years.
Buckle up.
Okay, so let's dive into some of these specific reversals. What are the big ones that really stand out to you?
Well, there are several that have already sparked controversy, obviously. Revoking the COVID-19 vaccine mandate for federal workers,
Right.
halting Green New Deal initiatives, and promoting fossil fuel.
So a big shift away from the Biden administration's focus on climate change and public health.
Absolutely. He's also removed Cuba from the list of state sponsors of terrorism, which is a move that some are praising as a step towards improving relations.
Right, but others are criticizing as appeasement.
Exactly. And then there's the reinstatement of the death penalty for certain federal crimes, which, of course, reverses Biden's moratorium on federal executions.
So it's hard to keep track of it all. Immigration crackdowns, government shakeups, policy reversals.
And we're just getting started.
But some of these actions, I have to admit, kind of make me chuckle a little bit.
Yeah.
Like renaming the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. Renaming Mount Denali back to Mount McKinley.
Yeah, those are definitely more on the symbolic side of things.
It seems more symbolic than anything else. What do you think is the thinking behind these more symbolic gestures? Are they just for show, or is there a deeper message here?
I think you're right. There's definitely a performative aspect to it. It's about appealing to a certain base and projecting a certain image.
Image of strength.
Strength, American dominance, all of that. But they also, I think, reveal something about his worldview and his understanding of America's place in the world.
Well,
The renaming initiatives, for instance.
yeah, those are interesting.
They're seemingly trivial, but they could be seen as attempts to rewrite history, assert a particular narrative about American identity.
American exceptionalism.
Exactly. So, while those might not have any immediate policy implications, I think they speak volumes about his broader vision, how he wants to shape the national conversation.
Yeah, it's about controlling the narrative.
Absolutely.
So we've got immigration crackdowns, government shakeups, policy reversals, symbolic gestures. It's a lot.
It's a lot to process, that's for sure.
And like you said, we're just scratching the surface.
We've got a lot more to dig into.
But before we get overwhelmed, let's take a closer look at some of the specific directives that are likely to have the biggest impact,
Okay. Yeah, let's focus in on those.
both domestically and internationally. And I'm particularly interested in the ones that are really going to, I think, reshape the very fabric of American society.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
You're talking about the executive order on transgender rights and the directive targeting DEI programs.
Yeah, those are definitely ones that are going to have a major impact.
Exactly. These are the ones that are going to hit people where they live,
Mhm.
literally. And they're going to spark a lot of debate about, I think, what it means to be American in the 21st century. So let's dive into those next.
Let's do it.
Okay, we've got a lot of ground to cover. You're absolutely right. These are the kind of directives that I think have immediate and very personal consequences for a lot of people. Let's start with the transgender rights order. So this one declares that the U.S. government will only recognize two genders, male and female,
Well-
and asserts that those are, well, not changeable.
Yeah, no room for nuance
A
there.
pretty bold statement.
Yeah.
What does that actually mean for transgender individuals? Like, practically speaking?
Well, it impacts a lot of things. Government communications, civil rights protections, federal funding, even how transgender individuals are treated in prisons. This order could even affect official documents like passports and visas, which could make it really difficult for transgender people to travel.
So it's not just about words. It has real-world consequences. Could make life much more difficult.
Exactly. And it kind of goes hand in hand with the directive on diversity, equity, and inclusion programs.
Right, DEI. He wants to hold all of those within the federal government, which, I mean, isn't that something that's been gaining a lot of traction in recent years?
It has. It's become pretty standard practice in a lot of organizations.
So why target it now?
Well, the order frames these programs as, and I'm quoting here, radical and wasteful. And it covers all federal agencies, but it even extends to organizations that receive federal grants or contracts.
Oh, wow. So there's a potential ripple effect beyond just the government itself. This could impact businesses and nonprofits, too.
Exactly. It's part of a larger pushback we're seeing against efforts to promote diversity and inclusion in various sectors of society.
Right.
This is going to be a major point of contention going forward, I guarantee you that.
It's fascinating how these orders connect to, like, larger cultural and political trends. It's
Yeah.
like we're seeing a realignment happening in real time.
Yeah, it's a pretty clear shift in priorities.
It's about more than just specific policies, right? It's about a vision for what America should be, what role the government should play in shaping social norms and values.
Exactly. It's about ideology.
Okay, so we've talked about immigration, government reform, undoing Biden's legacy, these culture war issues. Anything else from this first wave of directives that we need to hit?
Well, we can't forget about the economy. He also signed a directive aimed at addressing the cost of living.
Okay, so like inflation, housing costs, all that.
Yeah, all of it. It's not an executive order, more like a call to action for federal agencies to find ways to lower costs. Housing, healthcare, everyday goods, fuel, you name it.
Sounds pretty ambitious. Any specifics on how they plan to do that?
That's the thing. There aren't a lot of details yet. It's more of a, declaration of intent than a concrete plan. But it does show that economic concerns are on his radar, which, I mean, they always are for any president.
Of course, yeah. I guess we'll have to wait and see how he actually chooses to tackle these issues.
Exactly. They're complex problems with no easy solutions.
And speaking of things that are always on a president's radar, climate change. What's happening on that front?
Well, as you might expect, he's taking a very different approach from Biden. One of his first actions was to withdraw the U.S. from the Paris Climate Agreement. Again.
Oh, come on. Didn't we go through this whole thing during his first term? It feels like we're stuck on repeat.
It does, doesn't it? He pulled out, Biden rejoined, now he's pulling out again. It's a clear signal that he's not prioritizing international cooperation on climate change.
So what, he's going it alone?
Pretty much. He's putting the focus on what he sees as American energy independence.
Okay. And what about domestic policy related to climate and energy? Any big shifts there?
Well, he's declared a national energy emergency, vowed to ramp up fossil fuel production. He's also halted those Green New Deal initiatives that Biden put in place. So, yeah, we're seeing a major shift away from renewable energy and environmental regulations.
For those who might not remember, what was the Green New Deal again?
Right. It was this really broad set of policy proposals aimed at addressing climate change and economic inequality through investments in renewable energy infrastructure, job creation. So this reversal basically signals a return to, more traditional energy policies.
So it's like a full-on embrace of the energy policies that were dominant before the Biden administration.
Pretty much. And it's a reminder that these debates about climate change and energy policy, they're not going away anytime soon.
Not even close. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. Immigration, government reform, undoing Biden's legacy, culture war battles, the economy, climate change. Anything we've missed?
Well, we can't forget about the pardons. That was perhaps the most controversial and consequential action he took on his first day.
You're talking about the pardons for those involved in the January 6th Capitol riot.
That's right. Nearly 1,600 people who were arrested in connection with the riot are now pardoned. This includes some who were charged with assaulting or impeding federal officers, as well as members of, far-right groups like the Oath Keepers and Proud Boys who were convicted of seditious conspiracy.
This is huge. It's going to have a major impact on, how we view that day, how we understand accountability, what it even means to uphold the rule of law in this country.
It's a really significant moment, and it's going to have repercussions for years to come.
It's a reminder that history isn't just something we read about in textbooks. It's something that we are living through and shaping right now.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Wow. It's hard to even process all of this, to be honest. It feels
Yeah.
like the world has been tilted on its axis. It's a lot to take in.
I think that's a very apt way to put it. This flurry of executive actions is a clear sign that we're entering a new era, one that's likely to be just as turbulent and unpredictable as his first term, if not more so. But there's still more we need to cover.
Yeah, like the directive postponing the TikTok ban. Didn't he try to ban that whole social media platform before?
He did. And it's a good example of how even these seemingly straightforward issues can get really tangled up in politics and international relations. The ban was originally justified on national security grounds, but now it seems like economic considerations might be at play.
It's interesting. Some of these moves almost seem to contradict his previous actions. What do you think's behind that shift?
Hard to say for sure. It could be a reflection of, changing political calculations, or maybe even a recognition of just how complex it is to try and regulate a global platform like TikTok. But the postponement suggests that this issue is far from settled.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens there. So, okay, what have we got? We've got immigration hardball, policy reversals, some symbolic gestures, and then a few head-scratchers thrown in for good measure.
And that's just day one.
Exactly. And what remains to be seen is how these early moves will shape the rest of his term. It's almost hard to believe we've only just scratched the surface, right?
Yeah. Feels like we've been talking for hours.
It's a lot to unpack. So let's zoom out for a second. Big picture. What does all this activity, all this flurry of action on day one tell us?
Well, I think it tells us a lot about President Trump's priorities and his approach to governing.
How so?
Well, he's clearly signaling a return to, I think, a lot of the hardline policies of his first term.
Especially on things like immigration and national security?
Exactly. The reversals of Biden-era policies, it shows, I think, a real determination to reshape the political landscape, kind of erase what he sees as, his predecessor's missteps.
It's like hitting the undo button on the last 4 years.
Yeah, exactly. But it's about more than just undoing things. There's a sense of, I don't know, doubling down, amplifying certain themes, maybe even pushing the boundaries further than before.
Yeah, I see that. Like, take the pardons, for example. That's a pretty bold move.
It's definitely a statement.
It goes beyond just simply overturning convictions. It sends a message, I think, about who he stands with, what he considers acceptable behavior, even about his view of the January 6th attack itself.
It definitely raises some questions about his judgment.
And it sets a precedent, doesn't it? Like, what other norms might he be willing to challenge or overturn?
That's the big question, isn't it? Where does it end?
Exactly. And that's what makes all of this so significant, I think. These actions, they're not just about policy changes. They're about power dynamics. They're about setting a tone for his entire presidency.
It's a power play, for sure.
So if these directives are kind of like a prologue to his second term, what can we expect from the story that's about to unfold?
Well, if history is any guide, I think we can expect more turbulence, more controversy, more of the unexpected.
He's certainly never been one to shy away from a fight.
He's shown a willingness to disrupt the status quo, to challenge, conventional wisdom, to pursue his agenda with, I think, just relentless determination.
So more legal battles, more political clashes, more international tension?
Undoubtedly. I think we're likely to see court challenges to a lot of these executive orders, pushback from Congress, criticism from, both domestic and international actors.
It's almost like he's setting the stage for a series of high-stakes showdowns.
It's going to be a wild ride.
Okay, so we've got a president who's not afraid to shake things up. We've got a political landscape that's already feeling the tremors.
Yeah.
And a whole bunch of unknowns on the horizon. What's the one thing you think our listeners should keep in mind as we move forward?
I think it's crucial to remember that we're all part of this story now. These actions will have real-world consequences for everyone, whether we agree with them or not.
We're all affected.
Exactly. It's up to each of us to stay informed, to engage in, thoughtful dialogue, and to hold our leaders accountable.
Well said. We can't just sit back and watch the story unfold. We have to be active participants.
We have to ask tough questions, demand transparency, make our voices heard.
Couldn't agree more. This isn't just about politics. It's about the future of our country. And we all have a role to play in shaping that future.
Absolutely. We're all in this together.
On that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive.
Yeah, I think we've covered just about everything.
We've covered a lot of ground, but this is just the beginning. The story of President Trump's second term, it's just getting started. And we'll be here to help you make sense of it all as it unfolds.
Always here to help you navigate the chaos.
So until next time, stay curious, stay engaged,
Yeah.
and stay informed. And remember, the deep dive never ends.
We'll see you soon.